Hey there, friends. This isn't the type of video that I usually make for my channel, but I feel that the creation of this video is like this final piece in a karmic clearing that I've been moving through for quite a few years now. And I've always known that this time would come. I just wasn't sure when it would come. So here it is. If you're tuned in at all to the YouTube spiritual influencer scene, then you've probably heard the name Aubrey Marcus. He's a massive influencer who has like hundreds of thousands of followers, and he's the co-founder of this supplement and food and fitness business called On It with Joe Rogan. Certainly you've heard Joe Rogan's name. I don't actually follow Aubrey Marcus much at all, but from what I gather, there's like this certain segment of people who really look up to him as a spiritual teacher and as a model for, I think, what he calls divine union. And recently, in mid-May of 2025, he posted a video with his wife and their third partner, a younger woman, about a new form of relationship that they're exploring called radical monogamy. And that video set off this wave of really unhappy comments and reaction videos, in part because people were, I guess, very disillusioned by Aubrey Marcus's new stance on relationships. But there was a really interesting twist to all of these reactions, because people not only seemed to have something to say about Aubrey Marcus and the two women in his life, but also about another person who seemed to be like orchestrating or at least shaping the direction of the conversation in that particular video. And this person is their spiritual teacher, and his name is Marc Gafni. So before you go any further in this video, I invite you to pause the video and actually Google the name Marc Gafni, M-A-R-C-G-A-F-N-I. And the first page of Google usually has 2 or 3 pretty damning articles. But then go to page 2 of Google and you start to see quite a bit of very unsavory publicity. The comments and the reactions about Marc Gafni from that video were arguably worse than they were for Aubrey. And if nothing else, it seems that people were very much questioning Aubrey's choice of spiritual teacher. So I'm making this video because I have something really important to add to this conversation. And that is that what most people don't realize is that the main material that Aubrey Marcus apparently is using to defend his continued trust and relationship with Marc comes from a website called whoismarcgafni.com. All one word, whoismarcgafni.com. And buried within the depths of that website is an exhaustive and honestly exhausting series of 75 or 80 videos that cover everything from the false complaints of sexual abuse filed by 2 young women against Marc Gafni, his obsessive attempts to take down a woman named Donna Zerner. The videos include responses to his ex-wife, Haya Lester, his also videos about his new sexual narrative, and also videos that claim that others have weaponized their stories against him, and that, most importantly, that he's the victim of a decades-long smear campaign. So you just sort of need to ask yourself, why would someone who wasn't guilty of all these things need this many videos to defend themselves? So where am I going here? Well, where I'm going is that I know this site very intimately because I was the one that helped create it back in 2016, which is the last but not the first time that Marc Gafni faced a reckoning from those that he harm that was justified at that time as part of a larger mission, according to Marc Gafni, to evolve public culture. So I became one of Marc Gafni's students in 2015, and then I eventually found myself in part of his inner circle back when the organization was called the Center for Integral Wisdom. So my official role in that organization was executive vice president and director of marketing. So I'm not just someone from the outside. I was really in the inside and one of his students. And I conducted many of the interviews in that long list of videos intended to set the record straight and clear Marc Gafni's name. And Marc is still using those same videos that I helped to create, that I appear in, to try to clear his name and promote a version of himself that isn't accurate and isn't true at all. So here's what I want to say and to make clear is that I left Marc Gafni's community in 2019 under extremely painful circumstances because of what I came to see as his repeated abuse of power. And I do not in any way stand by any of the content that I helped create to defend him that's on that website. I want to make that clear. This video is my way of setting the record straight. It's also my step in making amends for the harm that I know that I caused by participating in creating and distributing those videos, harm that I caused, especially to the women who suffered abuse by Marc Gafni, including Sarah and Judy and Donna and Haya. And so I want to offer my deepest apologies directly to all of you. This video is not for Marc Gafni or even his current supporters like Aubrey Marcus. I'm not here to convince anyone who's still inside that inner circle because that is a lost cause. I am speaking to all of you who watched Aubrey's video and felt like something was off about his spiritual teacher. I'm speaking to all of those people who made reaction videos or who left comments about Marc Gafni to tell you how deeply, deeply, deeply impressed I am by how accurately you picked up on his character. I truly believe that there's a divine wisdom moving from within the collective that's speaking through each of you, and I really honor that. And thank you so much for making those reaction videos and your comments. When I tell people my experience of being involved with the Center for Integral Wisdom, the most common response that I get from people is like, how did you get involved with someone like Marc Gafni? And honestly, it's a totally fair question. Obviously, I wasn't thinking, oh, here's a toxic community with a charismatic, self-absorbed leader. I think I'm going to join. I was joining a very compelling vision. And what I've come to understand since I left Marc's organization is that it's often very intelligent, articulate people who get involved in high control groups. And you see this if you've watched Nexium, the documentary, which was filled with superstars like Allison Mack and Catherine Oxenberg, Scientology, Tom Cruise, John Travolta, like smart people, articulate, they got it going on. So interestingly, the same was true in Marc's organization. I think it's still true. When I was part of the Center for Integral Wisdom, many of the big players in the world of integral theory, of business and spirituality were also involved. There was Ken Wilber, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the late futurist and visionary Barbara Marx Hubbard, the late tantric yoga teacher Sally Kempton. All of them were part of it. And I think that's really what kept me part of the organization for longer than I may have stayed. Because I figured if all these brilliant and respected people support Marc, then maybe those red flags that I was feeling in my gut were wrong. Maybe I was the one who wasn't seeing things correctly. So basically, I was gaslighting myself. Another piece that I feel is critical to why I got involved with Marc and his organization is that in 2015, when I became his student, my husband had just survived a near fatal cycling accident. So he had broken his neck and back, and he suffered brain trauma. And I was in full-on caregiving mode. And if you've ever been a caregiver, then you know how utterly depleting that can be physically and emotionally. Caregivers don't often get the support that they need, and that was certainly true for me at that time. So in the midst of all of that, Marc offered what felt like support and structure and a sense of greater purpose to balance out how hard it was for me at home. And I thought I had found that, right? I was looking for meaningful work. I was looking for a community that shared my passion for transformation and awakening. And the vision of the Center for Integral Wisdom felt bold and optimistic. And I was drawn in by Marc's idea that the solution to our global crisis was a new story of reality, what he called an outrageous love story. And he framed this within what he referred to as integral evolutionary tantra or Kabbalistic tantra. So basically it was his own brand of neo-tantra that combined elements of Jewish mysticism, evolutionary theory, spiritual psychology, and Kashmir Shaivism. And that message was very compelling to me, and I brought my full heart into it. And I found myself getting deeper and deeper into the mission of the center. In 2016, I helped Marc launch a weekly broadcast called Evolutionary Church, and under my direction, we grew the membership of that to over 10,000 subscribers. I was the host, I was producing that weekly broadcast, and it felt really good. It felt very, very meaningful. And then Marc asked me to join the writing team for a book that he wanted to publish called Anatomy of a Smear, which later had the working title called Weaponizing Sex. And the book's purpose was essentially the same as that website, to clear his name and to counter the allegations against him. So after a few months, that book project was handed entirely over to me with Sally Kempton as my writing mentor. And I felt very deeply honored to do that work. This book became the primary focus of my work in the Center for Integral Wisdom. And in that process, Marc handed over to me hundreds of emails that he had saved from years prior. These were emails from all the women who had spoken publicly about his abuse, like Donna Zerner, Aya Lester, again, his ex-wife, many others. He also gave me correspondences from rabbis, co-workers, other key figures who had left his organization that he believed were conspiring against him. And so I dove really deep into this project, and I took it very seriously. And I even did my own sort of like novice level research. And Marc was often emphasizing this importance of being a good critical thinker, to be able to look for logic fallacies, to look for biases that others had and how they were portraying their stories of him. And along the way, there were obviously things that I overlooked, things that I didn't question, things that I explained away. My own confirmation bias was definitely at play because I kept looking for the evidence that supported what I wanted to believe, and I was ignoring the signs that didn't fit that the narrative that Marc was a victim of this decades-long smear campaign. So what happened was, at a certain point, after literally hundreds of hours of reading through emails, articles, transcripts, blog posts, interviews, something started to click for me. Something started to shift. Patterns began to emerge, and details that I had been previously glossing over started to stand out for me. And this entire narrative that Marc Gafni was the victim of a massive smear campaign began to unravel. It began to crumble. And what I realized was that Marc had placed in my hands the very evidence that revealed his abuse of power, including emails that didn't just suggest poor judgment, but that showed clear patterns of manipulation and coercion and control. And it was as if he trusted that my belief in him would be stronger than the objective facts. And for a long time, it actually was, but eventually I was able to see all through that. And when I finally recognized that I had been caught in the very same power dynamics that so many of these women had described, and that I had been complicit in vilifying them. And when I realized that, I was stunned. It felt like the whole ground beneath me fell away. I felt tricked. I felt angry. I felt deep remorse for the harm that I had caused, harm that I now see that I contributed to, even though that was unintentional and unknowingly and unintentionally. So leaving the Center for Integral Wisdom wasn't simple at all. I didn't make a public announcement. I didn't write a takedown blog post. I just quietly stepped away in 2019, completely severing my ties with Marc. And then I went into basically a spiritual and psychological free fall. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of shame, and it took me a long time to metabolize. I went to therapy so that I could metabolize and process what had happened and reclaim parts of myself that I didn't even realize that I had given away. And that's part of why it's taken me so long to speak publicly, because for a long time I didn't feel like I could. I was focused on healing, on making sense of my experience, what the hell happened here, and on taking responsibility in a way that felt real for me and not performative and out there. But when this recent wave of public conversation erupted in Aubrey's community, it felt like karma knocking at my door reminded me that the only way to complete this karmic cycle is to speak the truth and to take full responsibility for the part that I played in all of this. So in this long process of healing and facing my own karma and karmic patterns, I've come to see that people like Marc Gafni are not rare. He is not rare. His type is unfortunately alarmingly common. These kinds of spiritual leaders and teachers who are charismatic, well-spoken, seductive in their certainty, they're everywhere. And they're often the ones with the big YouTube channels or the best-selling books and the high-ticket retreats or immersion studies, all of that, right? But what I've also come to understand on the other side of that is that the authentic teachers, the ones who walk with humility and ethics and who are grounded in integrity, rarely look like that. They don't build empires. They don't have big Instagram followings. They don't surround themselves with secrecy or mystique. They're not pedestalized. And the other thing is that I've come to understand about my experience with Marc Gafni is that I needed to go through that. And I'm not saying that in a bypassy type of way, like, oh, everything happens for a reason. But more because Marc Gafni provided the exact conditions for the karmic patterns that I came into this lifetime to work through, to fully be rectified, right? So if it hadn't been Marc Gafni, it most definitely would have been someone else. So, in reflecting on this, my two primary karmic patterns are for seeking for love and approval and acceptance outside of myself, and working relentlessly to prove that I am worthy of love. And those were the exact hooks that got activated. And looking back, I can see that Marc promised me both of those. And I poured myself into that promise. I worked nonstop, day and night, to serve his cause. And through that work, I received the approval, the belonging, the sense of specialness, and love that I was craving. And that was the karmic loop. And in naming it now publicly, clearly, without blame, I'm not blaming him, I'm not blaming me. This is just part of how I complete it. And there's one final piece that I want to say, because people often assume that I must hate Marc Gafni. But the truth is, I don't hate Marc Gafni at all. If I hate anything, it's what he does, the manipulation, the harm, the subtle distortions. But my practice and the path that I'm on has brought me to the direct realization that Marc and I share the same true nature. Just like you and I share the same true nature. There is one infinite consciousness expressing itself as infinite diversity. And it's the tantric concept of unity and diversity. So what I take issue with is Marc's ego, his constructed personality, which is running the show here. And that personality is cunning and charming and persuasive and, yes, dangerous, as a lot of people have mentioned in their reaction videos. And so this reminds me of a story that Paramahansa Yogananda tells in Autobiography of a Yogi. And it goes like this. A Vedanta student who had learned that everything is one was walking through a forest when a wild elephant came charging at him. And the elephant's trainer, they're called a mahout, he was riding on top of the elephant. That elephant trainer called out to him and yelled for that guy to get out of the way, you're going to get hurt, right? But the man didn't. He just stood still thinking, nope, God is in the elephant and God is in me. Why should I move? And then, of course, the elephant trampled him, picked him up with his trunk and threw him to the ground and left him severely injured. And then later on, the man who got injured told a sage what had happened, and the sage replied, yeah, God is in the elephant, but he was also in the mahout, the elephant rider, right? So, and that's the person who told you to get out of the way. And that story stays with me because even though I know that we all share the same essential nature, that doesn't mean abandoning discernment. That doesn't mean don't trust your gut. The mahout, right, is part of that oneness too. And sometimes the most loving act is actually to move out of the way. There is no conflict at all to say that I can see that Marc Gafni and I share the same essence nature while still taking a stand for against what he's done, and what he continues to do. And I can recognize our shared nature without confusing that with trust. So that to me is the kind of discernment that this moment is calling for. And I think that a lot of people are reacting to, right? So where does that leave me now? So after leaving Marc's community, I didn't just, walk away from something. I had to rebuild everything from the ground up. And some of you watching this have seen that. I've had to re-examine everything. I've had to re-examine my relationship to truth, to practice, to power, to trust. And what emerged from that long process of inner work wasn't just healing, it was crystal clarity about the kind of spiritual space that I want to be part of, the kind of leadership that I believe in, the kind of lineage that I want to be in service to. And so I founded last year the Tantric Arts Collective, and It's not a cult of personality. It's not centered around just one teacher or one voice. It's an alliance of powerful women, of tantric teacher practitioners, therapists, embodiment guides, counselors, and coaches. And we're committed to walking this path together with accountability and mutual respect and ethics at the very, very foundation, right? This collective is dedicated to sharing the depth and the beauty of Tantra, of classical non-dual Tantra, alongside modern embodiment practices that meet the realities of our everyday life. And most importantly, we hold a very deep commitment to transparency and integrity and discernment. So this is the space, honestly, that I wish that I had had back then, a place where awakening isn't separate from ethics, where students aren't left to sort through spiritual confusion on their own, where no one is above question and no one is expected to surrender their sovereignty in the name of love or devotion. So my deepest hope is that the Tantric Arts Collective will be a sanctuary that offers a grounded, mature, ethical approach to Tantra. So I guess if you're someone who's experienced harm at the hands of a teacher or a spiritual community, I hope that you know that you're not alone and that there is a way forward. There are trustworthy teachers, there are trustworthy communities rooted in care and ethics and discernment. So I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know that I am committed to doing this work with transparency and humility and love. So please feel free to leave your comments below. This is really a critical conversation that we need to have in this moment in time, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So thank you so much for taking the time. If you got this far to the end of the video, thank you for taking the time to watch this. Please share it with others if any part of it resonated with you. Take care and namaste.